In Generation 2, we were given Dark and Steel types to beat the dominant Psychic types from Generation 1. And in Generation 6, we were introduced to the Fairy type to rein in Dragon types. With the introduction of each and every new type, competitive Pokemon was completely revolutionized. So, everybody has been waiting with bated breath until we got our 4th new type. And with the Indigo Disc DLC, it's here. This is the Stellar type, but it's a little different from other Pokemon types. You see, there is no Pokemon that is naturally the Stellar type. You can only become Stellar type through terastallization. Today, we are going to discuss the Stellar type's mechanics, what makes a type a good Tera type, and decide if the Stellar type is any good. Let's go. Before we can decide if the Stellar type is strong, we need to know what it does. And frankly, it's a little weird. First of all, Stellar type does not have any natural type interactions. Whatever type you were before you Tera into the Stellar type is what your type is treated as for damage calculation. For example, if you Terastallize your Incineroar, you will still be hit super effectively by Hydro Pump and Drain Punch. Plus, Stellar type attacks, either Stellar Tera Blast or Tera Starstorm, are super effective against Terastallized Pokemon. And since you're only Stellar Tera type if you're Terastallized, they're functionally super effective against Stellar type Pokemon. So Stellar isn't exactly stellar at defensive counterplay. But what about offensively? How does Stellar work with the Terastallization boosts? Well, moves that are the same as your original type, Flare Blitz and Knockoff, for our Incineroar example, will still get the same boost they'd get if you Terra'd into a Fire type or a Dark type. And for moves that aren't your base typing, you get a 1.2 times boost. Sounds pretty broken, right? Well, there is a downside. You only get each of these boosts once per type. From my own testing, it appears you need to actually deal damage for this to be used up. So for example, if you use Kingambit Sucker Punch, but it fails, you won't use up your Dark type Stellar boost. There's a few other weird mechanics too. There's a few moves in the game, like Burn Up, that deal huge damage, but make you lose your type, in that case Fire, after you use it. Normally, after this occurs, you cannot use that move again. We learned very early in Scarlet and Violet that if you Tera into the relevant type, in this case Fire, you can use the move over and over and over again. But if you Tera into a different type, like Water, you can't use it at all. Well, for some reason, Stellar type functions like you Terra'd into the right type. You can use Burn Up as much as you like, but of course you only get the Tera boost on the first one. Additionally, Terapagos, in its Stellar form, which it goes into after Terastallizing, always gets the Stellar boosts. They don't get used up. This is also true of any Pokemon in a Tera raid, but this video is about competitive play, so that's not super relevant. As for the two Stellar type moves, Tera Blast and Tera Starstorm, they're interesting. Stellar Tera Blast is always neutral unless it's hitting a Terastallized Pokemon, in which case it's super effective, but using this move lowers your special attack and attack by 1 stage. So it's pretty niche. It'll probably only come up on Pokemon that really care about dropping their own stats to abuse the ability contrary, like Enamorus Incarnate and Superior. Tera Starstorm is a huge 120 base power move that's the signature move of Terapagos. When Terapagos is Terra'd, this move is spread, hits both of your opponent's Pokemon, and is neutral against everything unless they Tera, in which case it's super effective. This is kind of busted. Imagine Astral Barrage or Make It Rain without any resists you can switch it into, but we don't have to worry about that for a while since Terapagos isn't legal yet. Alright, I think now we have a pretty good understanding of how Stellar Tera type works. So, next question, what makes a good Tera type? And a Stellar one of them? That's coming up next. But first, subscribe or you will always guess your opponent's Tera wrong. Very generally, there's 2 types of Teras, offensive Teras and defensive Teras. Tera types that mean to take advantage of the damage amplification the Tera provides, like Tera Water Palafin or Urshifu, or Tera Steel Golden Go, and Tera types that are meant to protect you from a type that you are normally weak to, like Tera Grass or Fairy Heatran. Most successful teams have a combination of Pokemon with offensive and defensive Tera types. Look at Giovanni Costa's team he used to win the most recent San Antonio Regional Championship. Tera Water Ogerpon, Tera Fire Farigiraf, Tera Fire Iron Hands, Tera Steel Golden Go, Tera Dark Urshifu Single Strike, and Tera Fairy Fluttermane. 2 of those Tera types are purely defensive, Farigiraf and Iron Hands, and the others are very offensive. Golden Go's Tera boosting Make It Rain, Urshifu's boosting Wicked Blow and Sucker Punch, Ogerpon's boosting Ivy Cudgel, and Fluttermane's boosting Dazzling Gleam and Moonblast. Both offensive and defensive Teras have their place, but when we take a closer look at what we've labeled offensive Tera types, we notice they aren't really purely offensive. Each and every one of those 4 offensive Tera types can actually be used for defensive play as well, making the Pokemon either neutral to or resist a common attack that would normally threaten to one-hit KO it or deal huge damage. Fluttermane will resist Sucker Punch, Golden Go will become neutral to Sucker Punch, Urshifu Single Strike loses its Bleak Windstorm weakness, and so does Ogerpon. Purely offensive Tera types are very rarely correct. Generally, only when there is an extremely important damage calculation that makes giving up defensive play worthwhile, such as Tera Grass Rillaboom, to threaten to KO less tanky Fluttermanes with Grassy Glide, or when the Pokemon already has exceptionally good defensive typing, such as Palafin, since water is one of the best defensive types in the game. So what kind of Pokemon will really want Stellar Tera? As we've said, purely offensive Tera types are often incorrect, but because you get boosts to more than one type of move in Stellar Tera, for a lot of Pokemon, you get a lot more out of it offensively than other Tera types. So is that extra offensive value better than taking a little bit of offense and a little bit of defense? Well, on some Pokemon, maybe. There's a few Pokemon, like Chinpao, that often use a purely defensive Tera type, in its case Tera Ghost, to protect it from fighting type attacks, Fake Out, and extreme speed. But some players opt for damage instead, with Tera Ice for better Icicle crashes, or Tera Dark for stronger Sucker Punches. Overall, neither of those are bad choices, but I think Ghost is better. Now, however, we have the option to use Stellar Tera and get a boost on 3 different types of attacks, because Chinpao usually runs 3 different ones on its moveset: the Fighting type Sacred Sword, Dark type Sucker Punch, and Ice type Icicle Crash. And because Chinpao is a frail Pokemon that often relies on Focus Sash to make sure it lives more than one hit, rather than relying on its typing, giving up some defensive option isn't the end of the world. So a frail Pokemon that doesn't value extra defensive utility too much may be the type of Pokemon that Stellar Tera ends up being strong on. Fluttermane is another option that people have been trying Stellar out on, because allowing it to maintain its Ghost typing lets it get a damage boost while still being immune to Fake Out, one of the few ways Stellar can be used defensively, and because it allows Fluttermane to get more value out of Shadow Ball, its secondary stab that it very rarely uses because it's significantly weaker than Moonblast even before factoring in Tera Fairy. Though personally on this one, I think getting the Dark Resistance is pretty valuable, and being able to spam your boosted attacks with Fluttermane, especially with a spread move like Dazzling Gleam, is a huge deal and a great way to create pins. Stellar may also be useful on a fast frail choice item user, like Choice Scarf Urshifu, if you intend on pivoting in and out to take advantage of all of its coverage. But with something like that, often you'll end up spamming one move over and over again, so the drawback may be worse than the upside. Now, from how we've talked, you might think that an Assault Vest Pokemon is a natural Stellar type user, especially one like Iron Hands or Dragonite or Metagross, right? After all 3 of these Pokemon run at least 3 different types of moves on their typical sets, and often run 4. And because they're bulky thanks to the Assault Vest, you'll probably be around long enough to take advantage of your Stellar boost 3 or 4 times on each different move, right? Wrong, bozo. Remember we kept talking about how Stellar's big drawback is that it offers virtually nothing defensively? Well, Assault Vest Pokemon want to be bulky, stick around for a few hits, and deal consistent, solid damage. Because being able to soak up a few hits is a huge part of their role, and Stellar Tera offers literally 0 utility in that vein, it will basically always be better to run something like Tera Grass on your Iron Hands, Tera Fairy on your Metagross, or Tera Normal on your Dragonite. You'll end up dealing more damage by protecting yourself from your common weaknesses and sticking around for another turn or 2 or 3, and making your opponent stay on their toes and guess, than you will by just trying to do as much damage as possible in one hit. That isn't these Pokemon's role, and I think Stellar Tera Pokemon need to be focused on those one-hit knockouts. So, the verdict for me?
This is not a banger. This is not a banger. And I know bangers. I know bangers.
Stellar type is a good option. Powerful on the right type of Pokemon, but not something I'd expect to see on a lot of different Pokemon. But I could be wrong. Let me know what you think in the comments, tell me what you want me to cover next, and thanks for watching.